The other day, I was looking at paintings to make them into memes. So I was looking through these masterpieces to add my own life observations to them when this particular one caught my eye. Who was this woman? And why was she so fixated on the casket in front of her? What was going through her mind? Why was no one else paying attention? Would it be negligent to get so absorbed into one thing? I think it's easy to back away from a painting like this. Public interest in tragedies and funerals is very low indeed. But here's a curious observation from Soren Kierkegaard. For whatever is great can never do damage when it is understood in its greatness. It's like a two-edged sword. So perhaps we can be brave today and take a closer look at the painting. The Scream, by Edward Munch, is often presented as the pinnacle of existential art. Who knows? Why not call it that? It does speak to the dread human beings encounter and expresses it in a surreal way that we don't see visually, but often feel. But what if there was a piece out there that showed more of the detail about how the expectations of different people collide in a more telling way? This 1877 oil on canvas was painted by Francisco Padilla Oritz. You can travel to the National Prado Museum, or Museo del Prado, in Madrid to take a closer look at it today. I've never heard of this artist before. Here's a few of his other famous ones. The rendition of Granada, this one about a baptism of a prince, and there's this familiar face, Juana la Loca, or just Joanna the Mad. You could probably call her Crazy Joanna. I studied this language in school, so I might not be saying her name very well. A common theme I see in Oritz's works is how he likes to compare extremely heavy forces in collision with each other by looking at their face, posture, and actions. There's something about how unusual a face looks on a meme and how much people want to see that. Is it just aesthetics and herd thinking, or is there more to it than just that? Also, like any great Shakespearean play, Oritz's paintings seem to have a foreground and a background to them. Like in this painting called Love Sickness. Central to the painting is this exchange between a man and a woman. But if you look over here, what's this guy thinking? Is that the dad? Or in this painting called The Rendition of Granada, what are these guys thinking? Is he thinking, oh no, we're losing control of our nation, we're cooked? And is this other guy thinking like, yeah, you're so cooked? Here's my existential theory for you. The relationship between the foreground and background is the playground of irony. Anyway, that's what I like about Francisco Padilla Oritz. I'm not truly sure what motivated the man historically. It sounds like he may have wanted to paint so much because of his financial problems he found himself in. But as painters like René Magritte have observed, you can't truly see what's going on inside someone. You can also point to gambling debts as a motivation for even existential heroes. Take Dostoevsky, for example. Even though it was more like his sudden confrontation with the end of his life that changed the way Fyodor looked at everything. Like anything else, I'm speaking here from my freely chosen vantage point. Ulterior motives are inseparable from the human condition. Maybe that's why even the impression of something authentic can be quite staggering. Is it possible to keep secret the conspiracies that people plan and to use them for good instead of evil? Perhaps you could read Jesus when he said, I will make you fishers of men, as something like committing to teach his followers how to lure people into something that heals them and renews them inside. As we reflect on this painting, I want our journey to cover 4 places. A story about a surprise I had at the Louvre, reflection on the painting itself, what some proto-existentialists may have observed about this piece, and the historical Joanna. As students of life, my hope is that we can survey this amazing work of art and maybe gain a better understanding about what it takes to find meaning in this life. In April 2002, my girlfriend and 3 of her friends wanted to travel from where we were studying in the UK to Paris, France. We wanted to take the new tunnel under the English Channel, but you had to book that a year in advance. We only spent a few days in Paris, but the place that surprised me the most was the Louvre, specifically the portrait art there. What especially stood out to me was that the paintings were not given prominence based on the skill of the artist, but the extent to which the mythological and historical subjects reflected outwardly the inner conditions that they were going through. This is not much of an original observation, though. About that time, I was reading Shadowgraphs, an essay by Soren Kierkegaard, reflecting, among other things, about how impossible it is to visibly show what is invisibly happening in a person's spirit. One of these portrait masterpieces in the Louvre is, of course, the famous Mona Lisa. I can still remember my grandma asking me, as a child, why I thought she was smiling. The way I remember it, she told me that since no one knows for sure why the historical woman was smiling, that a lot of artists think it means we can take any view we want about why she was smiling. I would later go on to learn that accepting an unprovable viewpoint on purpose and taking responsibility for it is basically what Descartes and all of modern philosophy revolves around. But not just that. That's also what faith is, and what happens when you choose to believe anything, since, strictly speaking, no one knows anything. Socrates and Descartes made that pretty clear, and if you disagree with them, like so many people I bump into on Facebook, may I be the first to ask you why you haven't started your own school of philosophy? So often, it's the very people who say they know things that not only do not know things, they don't even know what little can be known, which for Descartes are the things you yourself commission inside, like thoughts, decisions, commitments, and devotion. Instead of sharing a load of hubris about the things people know, why not just drop them and share the things you believe? It's not better to do that because it's easier, although it often is. It's better to do that because it's simpler. So just like we wash up on the shores of life, not knowing anything about what is going on, or the world we have been thrust into, as viewers we come to this painting with a lot of questions to dwell on here. What are these women talking about? What are these dudes gazing upon? What is going on inside this person? Why does no one else seem to care about the funeral? Would it be any different to these people if they were in front of a forest or in outer space? Is she nuts? Are they nuts? Is everyone nuts except for a single individual? Here, my thoughts take some very peculiar bends and turns that I would like you to journey with me through. Maybe this woman is like the mountain people described in Hillbilly Elegy. We're hill people, and we respect our dead. What if this woman here is the only person in the painting who understands that she is mortal? I don't get a sense of how limited our days are here by talking about errands or gossiping with people. Existence is absurd in the sense that one cannot convey it in words. A person's own life is in many respects unique to them. Or as one existential hero put it, one of our chief jobs in life, it seems to me, is to realize how rare and valuable each one of us really is. That each of us has something which no one else has, or ever will have, something inside which is unique to all time. What if everyone in this painting is a philosopher, and they don't care about the death of one dude, because the essence of humans, the idea of what it means to be a human, goes on as long as there are humans. And this one woman here values existence over essence. Because while we can debate what happens after a person breathes their last, we should all agree that a person has been lost to us, at least for our time here in this life. Philosophy doesn't address the world of existing things. It only addresses them as abstractions. This is why Plato in the Phaedrus considered love to not be truth itself, but only the vehicle toward truth. In Plato's mind, love is inferior because it focuses on existing things which are changing and always becoming. But what if this woman here became confronted with how the only ideas we have in our heads are the ones we allow to be there? Suppose these men and women over here are trying to define what justice is, or trying to build a city in words. This woman over here seems to be ready to say, All the words ever spoken will do nothing to compensate me for my lost husband. What does philosophy have to console such a woman with? Nothing very personal, in my opinion, and maybe the lives we live here in the modern world have little about them that could be confused as personal. What if the fixation of this woman has united her in a way that everyone else in society is divided about? A hallmark of romantic comedies and G-rated movies these days is what makes true love different from bad love. So often, we are told that the people seeking bad love are only looking for one thing. And by that, they mean physical, visual aspects of love. How singular are such people? How fixated are they? Appetites, I'll suggest to you, can be very fleeting things. To say that these people seeking bad love are only seeking one thing sounds like a great misrepresentation. People trying to scratch their itches are constantly moving from one craving to the next. Who isn't constantly moving? Well, this woman right here doesn't seem to be going anywhere. What is she standing on to make her perspective so grounded? Now let's take a look at what some pseudo-existentialists... Wait, does that sound funny to you? Okay. That's better, thanks. Let's take a look at what some proto-existentialists might observe about a piece like this. I'm thinking we could get something from Shakespeare and Solomon's perspectives. A lot of people think of the book of Proverbs in the Bible as the signature writing of Solomon, and then there's this other book that has been largely rejected by most people, Ecclesiastes. Oftentimes, I notice that when the public finds no significance in something, it's because there's something personal or privately significant about it. Like take Whistler's Mother, for example. It's not exactly popular art, but people view the painting and think, this man had a connection with his mom, and that trumps anything I see at the art galleries. Even if it's not their own mother in the painting. By the way, James Whistler did not like the way people saw his painting, because to him the painting only had personal significance to himself. When you see this picture, do you think of your own mother? Two of the most existential writings of all time have to be Job and Ecclesiastes. Solomon pivots away from looking at how the world works and how people prevail in it, and pivots toward what matters to him. And his answer is surprisingly limited. I'm not kidding. Back in high school, one of my friends laughed about how at his Christian school, seniors were asked to share a Bible verse in the yearbook. Well, as a joke, apparently a lot of seniors wrote the NIV translation of Ecclesiastes 1:2. Everything is meaningless. I was surprised to hear the Bible say something like this. Theologians like Aquinas have claimed it is against the Bible to despair. Oh yeah, our boy Kierkegaard basically said despair was a sickness unto death. Then I checked out the Hebrew, and again, I studied this language and not Hebrew. The Hebrew word here is havel, which literally means a vapor or a breath. Like Solomon is writing to say that life is short, and if you blink, you're going to miss it. Your next breath might take longer than the amount of time you have left. Okay, so now that we have a sense for the existential mood of Ecclesiastes, if Ecclesiastes was a living, breathing human today, how might it describe this painting? Mayhap it would say, better to spend your time at funerals than at parties. After all, everyone dies, so the living should take this to heart. Wow, a lot of people would see that as a downer and quickly turn that show off. How could you get into something like that? Well, for me, the unusualness of it is striking. Think of it like you see some kind of YouTube vaudeville or something wacky like that, and you're like, I've never seen anything like this before. But then to amplify things, you say to yourself, I think this is somehow exactly describing my life, and I'll regret disregarding it. And then to further reinforce this vibe, you say to yourself, my time here is limited, and I had better get to living it. Is that what this woman in the painting is taking in? Like there's an immensity to this she just can't wrap her mind around? And then there's this guy. Shakespeare was definitely celebrated as a hero when he died. I went with my girlfriend in the UK to see Stratford-upon-Avon, where he's buried. They loved this guy so much, they buried him in the church. That's some kind of a big deal because theater was viewed with a lot of the same skepticism that people have for Hollywood and all its fakeness today. But somehow people still respected him. Spoiler alert, when you marinate in his play Hamlet, you'll see what an existential figure the bard was. In the play, the prince asks whether life is worth the fighting and opposition and outrageous fortune we find when we are washed up into it. Presenting this choice as a question reminds us that there isn't an answer baked into finding ourselves here. Hamlet found an answer to the question by answering the question for himself and daring to confront the injustice he found in Denmark. Is this woman basking in the dizziness of wondering whether or not to be or not to be? Does she look like she has a vertigo here? I can just see Soren putting his hand on her shoulder and saying, "Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom." If a tragedy itself contained its own answer, then there would be no anxiety. None. Anxiety is a special kind of fear. It's a fear of the possibilities and how they don't pick themselves. Kierkegaard said the only way to overcome anxiety was to choose absolutely. If this was an actual woman, do you think she would have been as decisive as Soren prescribed? Let's take a look at the historical woman behind the curtain and see if maybe we end up learning something about our own lives and the person we could or might not choose to be. So it turns out Joanna La Loca, or Joanna the Crazy, was an actual existing person. I'm not able to reach inside of Joanna and see what is going on in there. The only person who was ever able to do that was Joanna. That is, if, of course, she was willing to take a look inside her life. For a lot of historical figures, we can look at details, and depending on the case, feel confident about who someone was, even if not everyone agrees. And perhaps we can do that here. And by the way, not everyone agrees about Joanna La Loca. The two biggest theories people seem to have about her is that either, one, she actually had a brain that simply was not working, or her family wanted power more than keeping her out of an insane asylum. Before we get into that, a bit of backstory on this person. She was born in 1479. When she was a girl, she was considered an infant princess and probably had no expectation she was going to be queen of two countries. But after a series of passings, that is exactly what happened. She became presumptive heir to Castile and Aragon. She had a soaring regard for her husband, Philip the Handsome, although he was probably not a faithful husband to her. And yet, despite this significant flaw, when he passed, Joanna insisted on keeping his remains unburied and close by. She reportedly stopped anyone trying to get near Philip's body. One way to explain that was insanity. Adding to that explanation was the asylum she was put into, and when she reported fears about people trying to end her life, the attendants were told to stop talking to her. A different explanation is people wanted to rule, and people in power tended to go missing in one way or another. And while the affection and care that her husband had for her had long departed, she remained devoted to him, which might have been her telling her circumstances, and perhaps the world, "You don't get to tell me who I am." A strong case for the claim that Joanna was not actually crazy includes looking at how, 1. Male royalty attempted to capture her hand in marriage after Philip died. She made it her personal mission to reject all of these offers. I find it hard to see how the elites of Europe would want to marry Joanna if she had truly lost her mind. The cloister she was at was attacked by a mob seeking to get her out from under the rule of her son, Charles V. Oh, that's right, Charles V was her son. I should mention, Charles V was probably the most famous ruler of the Holy Roman Empire, as in like ever. He had this life motto, plus ultra. That was not very existential, for reasons I'm not going to get into here. Anyway, the mob wanted to remove Charles V from power, and when Joanna refused to take over, the mob decided she was nuts and sent her back to her asylum. This is an indication that maybe Joanna's mental health was being evaluated on the basis of how convenient it was for other people that she was mentally fit. I feel compelled to say that while I don't know if she was crazy or not, I find it super cool that she turned down the mob demanding that she rule. That is such a base move to make. While so many people fritter their lives away wishing other people would offer their lives to them to be ruled over, here's someone turning them down. Reminds me of Jesus making the same decision several times during his life. Existentially speaking, the message is, I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and I'm not going to do what the crowd tells me to do. So, a couple things Joanna might have been thinking in this painting are, how shall I now get bread? A lot of women lose their husbands and wonder about how they will be able to stay alive. Perhaps Joanna had vertigo, thinking about the potential suitors, the potential uprisings from a power vacuum, the loss of protection from not having a living husband anymore. I think these would all be very natural fears, and while I hope I wouldn't let it steer my ship, so to speak, if I were in Joanna's shoes, I'm sure I would be wondering about all that. Isn't this whole thing we call life just a vapor? Just a breath? Just here for a moment? What does all the learning about court etiquette and diplomacy amount to when we are only here for such a small period of time? What are all the vulnerabilities people think they have, like getting fired, getting rejected, gaining weight, getting a low number of views on their videos, living under a president they don't like, and so on? When even with the best outcomes for all these things, we are still going to end up like Philip the Handsome, in a casket. Maybe she was thinking about all the wishes and dreams she had with Philip by her side, having his strength, his children, his validation and affection. Maybe she was thinking about all the ways she let him down. Maybe she was thinking about how she would look at her life as a widow if she were in someone else's shoes. Maybe Joanna was thinking about how she would be buried with her late husband someday. There's no way to see what was going on inside of this woman. Even the people who lived with her couldn't arrive at what to make of her. So what hope is there for the rest of us today? I can't begin to guess what tier of existential hero she was. What we can do instead is ask ourselves how she may have escaped from the surface level perspective of the crowd, so that we can face our own griefs and hardships with an understanding of what cannot be shaken. When the variations and illusions you see in life are wiped away, who is the person underneath? Without having certainty about your circumstances, have you managed to live your deepest longings and devotion? What steps could you take today to change for the better? By the way, that girlfriend I took to Stratford in Paris became my wife in the next year. We've been married almost 20 years together, and I'll suggest that if you want to have a good marriage, then pause and reflect on A, what your life would be like without that person, and B, how you can always be yourself, even without them. Thanks for exploring this painting with me today. I hope you found something that built you up and expanded your understanding. How do you see the woman in the painting? Leave a comment down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to Existential Heroes. Thanks for watching.